Welcome to Chapter 8, Chapter 8 being the last chapter in our book and the last chapter of the course. In this video, we are going to take a look at the yield percent and our edible portion and as purchased portions. And that looks like this if you use the second of our three pyramids. And remember, all three pyramids work the same way, they just have different values. So if you remember the last pyramid that we used in the last chapter, in Chapter 7, you're very familiar with the way this looks. Here we have the edible portion, which is how much of an ingredient we have left once we've prepared it and or cooked it. We have the AP, which is the as purchased. How much of that ingredient did we buy? And by how much, I'm not talking about price, I'm talking about quantity. Same thing with EP. These values here, EP and AP, is the quantity of the ingredient. And then we have the yield percent. How much of our original portion do we have left to serve and sell back to our customers? So we're going to use this pyramid to figure out some of these calculations. And remember, they work the same way. If we have the EP and the AP amount, we see that the pyramid tells us to divide and multiply by 100. It'll give us the yield percent. If we have the EP and the yield percent, again, they're on top of each other. If we divide it, we will get the AP amount. And the last way we can use the pyramid, if we know the yield percent and the AP amount, then we multiply those two together and it will let us know what the EP amount shall be. Let's put it to practical use. Here's our first exercise. We have a list of items. We have how much we bought, the AP weight, and again, we're talking about the quantity, not the price. So this is how much of each of these ingredients we bought, and the rest of these need to be calculated. We have a column of trim loss. In other words, once we prepared the asparagus, we started off with 14.5 pounds, but we trimmed away 5.5 pounds. So then now we will be able to figure out the yield weight or the EP amount, same thing. And then we're going to get the yield percent, and they want us to round off to 2 decimal places. So let's begin. The first part of what we need to do is to get the yield weight or the EP amount, and we do that with the information in the two columns before this. Our AP weight was 14.5 pounds. We trimmed away 5.5, so 14.5 minus 5.5. We get a yield weight or an edible portion EP amount of 9 pounds. Now we go to the yield percent formula, and if you remember the pyramid, we take the EP amount, in this case 9 pounds, we divide it by the AP amount, which is 14.5, and then of course we multiply by 100 to get a percent. So the yield percent for our asparagus in this example is 62.07%. Moving on to the broccoli, we've bought 27 pounds, that's our AP weight, and we have a trim loss of 10 pounds, 10 ounces. We know that working with decimals instead of pounds and ounces is much easier, so we're going to convert 10 pounds, 10 ounces into its decimal equivalent in pounds. The no-brainer part, we have 10 whole pounds. We simply need to deal with the 10 ounces, and we do that, of course, by dividing 10 by 16 to get the decimal amount. So we end up with 27 pounds, our AP purchase, minus our trim loss in decimal form, it's 10.625. And then we subtract those two and we get 16.375 pounds. Very important, because now we can move on to the yield percent. We're going to take how much we have left, our EP amount of 16.375, and we're going to divide it by the amount of pounds we bought, which is 27, and then of course multiply it by 100 to get the percent equivalent, and we see that our yield percent for the broccoli is 60.65%. Moving on to the cabbage, we bought 18.25 pounds and we trimmed away 3 pounds and 12 ounces. So again, the first thing you'd want to do is to convert both of these into their decimal equivalents. So our AP weight of 18.25 pounds would be 18.25. 18 pounds and 1/4 pound is 4 ounces, or 4/16, or just divide 1 by 4. 1/4 pound is 0.25. So the AP weight is 18.25. The trim loss is 3 pounds and 12 ounces. So 3.12/16. And when you divide that, you get 3.75. So here's a quick formula for this using the decimal equivalents. 18.25 pounds, our AP weight, minus 3.75 pounds, our trim loss, leaves us with 14 pounds and 5 ounces. We can go from there and get to the yield percent. 14.5 is our it's our EP weight, 14.5 pounds. And we're going to divide that by the 18.25 pounds that we purchased, and of course multiply it by 100, so we get 74.45% as a yield. In other words, 79.45% of our original purchase is available for us to use. Moving to the cucumbers, we bought 8 pounds and we trimmed away 21 ounces. Again, we probably want to do one of two things: figure out how many ounces we have in 8 pounds, or convert 21 ounces to its decimal equivalent in pounds. Here's what I did here. I just did that. I converted 8 pounds to ounces by multiplying 8 by the amount of ounces in a pound, 16. So we bought AP 128 ounces, subtract 21 ounces, we're left with 107 ounces. So what's the yield percent in this? Well, my EP weight of 107 ounces divided by my AP weight of 128 ounces times 100, we get an 83.59% yield for our cucumbers. We move on to the honeydew, and now we're going to try something a little bit different. Our purchase was 6 2-pound melons. We bought 6 melons. Each of the melons weighed 2 pounds. And as you can see, our yield weight was 8.5 pounds. So what did we trim away? Well, 6 times 2, we bought 12 pounds. And if we only have 8.5 pounds left, we would do our 6 times 2, which is 12, minus the 8.5, which is the EP amount, leaving us with a trim loss of 3.5 pounds. In other words, we trimmed away 3.5 pounds of our original 12-pound purchase. Still need to know the yield percent, and that formula hasn't changed. You take the EP amount and divide it by the AP amount, in this case 12 pounds, so 8.5 divided by 12, and of course multiplied by 100. The yield percent for our melons, 70.83%. Moving on to the onions, we bought 25 kilograms. By the time we were done, we only had 22.2 kilograms left. So our AP weight minus what we have left shows us that we trimmed away 2.8 kilograms. To the yield percent, again, the only thing we're interested in to figure out the yield percent is our EP amount, and we're going to divide it by our AP amount, or in this case 22.2 divided by 25 times 100 gives us a yield percent of 89%. In other words, 89% of our original purchase of onions is all we have left. Or if you want to look at it from the other side, 11% of what we bought is no longer available for this recipe. We refer to that 11% as the waste percent. But for now, let's just work with the yield percent. Here's how much we had left after peeling. Here's what we originally bought, a yield of 89%. Let's continue on with the leeks. We bought 6.65 pounds of leeks. We trimmed away 3 pounds, so let's subtract 3 pounds from our 6.65 purchase. It leaves us a yield weight, or an EP amount, of 3.65 pounds. Let's take that EP amount of 3.65 divided by the AP of 6.65 pounds, multiplied by 100, and we're left with a 54.89% yield percent. The tomatoes, we bought 18.75 pounds of tomatoes. We trimmed away 19 ounces. Let's convert one of these weights to its decimal equivalent. And what I did here is I took the 19 ounces and I divided it by 16 to give us 1.1875 pounds worth of onions. So I subtracted the 1.1875 pounds of onions from our AP amount of 18.75, and you can see I was left with 17.5625 pounds of onions. That's the EP amount. So 17.56, I took the liberty of rounding that off to 2 decimal places. So the EP amount, 17.56, divided by 18.75 times 100, of course, gives us a yield percent of 94%. 94% yield in our tomatoes. And the last example here for the zucchini, we purchased 15.6 kilograms. We yielded 14 kilograms. So what did we trim away? 15.6 minus 14. We trimmed away 1.6 kilograms of our zucchini. But to get the yield percent, we only concern ourselves with the yield weight, or the EP amount, of 14 kilograms. We're going to divide that by 15.6 kilograms and multiply it by 100, and we get 89.74% for the yield on the zucchini.